to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this past weekend. Unified junior middleweight champion turned welterweight contender Natasha Jonas was in action opposite the Ring America's own Candy Wyatt. And as I predicted, as I expected, Natasha Jonas was better, just better. Better at every turn, better all around, out hustling and outgunning Candy Wyatt.
Behind the jab and the straight, fighting out of the southpaw stance. In spite of Natasha being some years older than Candy, she looked the sharper fighter, the faster and stronger fighter.
Candy Wyatt's not bad, you know. Mid-range to inside, she's quite capable.
Yeah.
The trial in this past weekend's fight was getting there. Getting close enough to Natasha to put punches together. And for Candy, that was a losing effort.
Natasha couldn't miss her with that jab.
Stepping into it and bringing over that backhand. We know Natasha, she's got a strong backhand. She's always had a strong backhand.
Candy Wyatt on the receiving end of it, allowing Natasha to gain ground and put punches together in the pocket.
Referee waved it off in the 8th round after seeing Candy Wyatt on the receiving end of many clean shots, hard shots.
2 rounds left.
Candy wasn't about to turn it around. She never lost her footing and she didn't lose consciousness. She was stopped on her feet.
The contest was.
I mean, did Candy Wyatt have enough left in the tank to finish the fight, to finish the full 10 rounds? And perhaps she did, but the amount of punishment that she was taking
It was a losing effort.
she probably could have seen the 10th round, but not without sustaining more damage, not without taking more punishment.
Candy Wyatt, brave girl, brave fighter. Situation like that where perhaps the fighter is too brave for their own good. The referee has to save them from themselves.
And that's what Marcus McDonald did in the 8th round, waving it off. Now Natasha Jonas is a 2-division champion, having picked up the newly vacated IBF title. The question now is, what is she going to do?
There were 2 other champions at this weight.
Newly crowned WBO champion Sandy Ryan of the United Kingdom and Ring Magazine and lineal champion Jessica McCaskill of the United States, set to be locking horns very soon. I think I heard a blurb about their fight going down here stateside in September.
On the matchroom side of things, therein lies the dilemma for Natasha Jonas. She's with Boxer. I hardly think she's going to go back to Matchroom. She seems to have an axe to grind with them.
Though now campaigning as a welterweight, not just a welterweight champion, newly crowned, in possession of the IBF title. What is she going to do? What's she going to do with the blue belt? She walked away from undisputed at 154 pounds. She could have fought Terry Harper, chose not to.
Another Matchroom fighter.
The other 2 champions at this weight are on the Matchroom side of things. News broke a little over a week ago that not only will Jessica be fighting Sandy Ryan in her next fight, but she's inked a new multi-fight deal with Matchroom. And what that means is that whether Jessica wins or Jessica loses, she'll be on the Matchroom side of things for the foreseeable future. Thus, not an option for Natasha.
I mean, not unless she plans on crossing over, and I don't think she does.
The only decent-sized fight that I can see Natasha Jonas having this calendar year, beyond the one she just had this past weekend, the only decent-sized fight that seems realistic to me is perhaps a fight with Top Rank's own Mikaela Mayer, former unified super featherweight champion turned lightweight contender and a tall drink of boxing.
She could easily fill out at welterweight just like Natasha Jonas, lest we forget. Natasha Jonas used to campaign as low as 130, as high as 154. Mikaela could do the same thing. She's got the frame for it.
It's a realistic fight because the network relationship already exists between Top Rank and Sky Sports and Boxer.
The people at Boxer were actually entertaining a fight between Natasha Jonas and Clarissa Shields, at least for a short while. A fight between Natasha and Mikaela is a lot more realistic and doable.
I'm sure it's a fight that Mikaela would be receptive to. I'm sure she'd like to fight for an alphabet title to become a 2-time 2-weight champion.
And Natasha, in spite of becoming a 2-weight world champion this past weekend, the fight with Mikaela would have more of a profile than the fight with Candy that she just had.
I mean, outside of that, I don't know what Natasha Jonas plans on doing. There is widespread speculation that this could be Natasha's final year in the sport of boxing, at least based on things that Joe Gallagher said.
Well, she's not retired yet, and she just became a 2-division champion, so let's see what she does.
Given the political situation between boxer fighters and matchroom fighters, at least one significant fight that Tasha can have is a fight with Michaela Mayer. Let's see if she don't explore it. In men's bantamweight news, Emmanuel Rodriguez, former IBF bantamweight champion Emmanuel Rodriguez, and Melvin Lopez are set to fight for the newly vacated IBF title August 12th.
It's going to be a busy weekend. That's the same weekend that Anthony Joshua is supposed to be fighting Dillian Whyte for the second time.
This fight between Emmanuel and Melvin, a long-discussed fight for the last remaining bantamweight title, has a firm date and a tentative location. BoxingScene.com has learned that the Emmanuel Rodriguez versus Melvin Lopez vacant IBF bantamweight title fight will take place August 12th at a yet-to-be-confirmed venue in the greater Washington, D.C. area. The update comes 2 months after Premier Boxing Champions PBC informed the IBF that July 15th was in play, though mostly as a placeholder, at a point when its summertime schedule was still taking shape. TGB Promotions obtained the rights to the bout as the lone bidder during an April 18th hearing.
See that the PBC's summertime schedule was still taking shape in many ways, so is the bantamweight division. In the absence of Naoya Inoue, its conqueror, its former undisputed champion, the belts are being redistributed.
TGB Promotions obtained the rights to the bout as the lone bidder during an April 18th hearing conducted via Zoom via IBF headquarters in Springfield, New Jersey. A minimum acceptable bid of $25,000 was placed to secure the rights to the fight, though both boxers are expected to make more than the result of the purse bid hearing.
One would hope so. $25,000 between two guys for a title fight.
That's not a lot of money, even as far as bantamweights go.
Those are peanuts.
They're saying that both Emmanuel and Melvin stand to make much more than just the winning bid. The winner will fill the vacancy left behind earlier this year by Naoya Inoue,
Former undisputed champion.
who will challenge unified WBC and WBO Super Bantamweight champion Stephen Fulton on July 25th in Tokyo. Puerto Rico's own Emmanuel Rodriguez previously held the IBF Bantamweight title, which he claimed in a May 2018 victory over England's Paul Butler. Just one successful defense followed, a 12-round victory over Australia's Jason Maloney, before he was stopped inside of 2 rounds by Naoya Inoue in May of 2019. Maloney has since claimed the WBO Bantamweight title.
The division is taking shape. Maloney's got the WBO very soon. Emmanuel Rodriguez could have the IBF. Nonito Donaire may soon claim the WBC. And you know that they're both on the Showtime side of things. So if Nonito wins his next fight and Emmanuel Rodriguez wins his, maybe they can set up a unification match between the two.
We'll see. It was a rough road back to contention for Rodriguez, who made his way back to the top of the queue after a one-sided technical decision win over Gary Antonio Russell, one of Gary Russell's brothers, last October 15th in Brooklyn, New York. The bout was packaged as a part of a 4-man box-off ordered by the IBF, which included Astrolabia's 6th-round knockout of Nikolay Potapov last December 17th in Las Vegas. Astrolabia, who is also guided by Sean Gibbons, opted out to pursue the vacant WBO bantamweight title, which left Rodriguez as the highest-ranked contender.
It also paved the way for Lopez to enter the world title picture. The development was redemption for the Miami-based Nicaraguan, who was previously in line to challenge for the WBA title before February ratings update bumped him down out of contention.
So who's got the WBA title now?
Takuma Inoue, Naoya Inoue's younger brother, claimed the vacant title a few weeks ago opposite the ring Laborio Solis.
He's got that belt. Emmanuel Rodriguez and Melvin Lopez are set to fight for this one. Lopez has won 8 in a row since suffering his lone career defeat, a 9th-round knockout of Jose Velasquez in October of 2019.
He's won 8 fights in a row since then.
The way it breaks down. Very soon, Emmanuel Rodriguez could see himself become a 2-time IBF champion, 2-time champion in the men's bantamweight division. Nonito Donaire very soon. He could be picking up the green belt, the WBC title.
Jason Maloney's got the WBO, and Takuma Inoue, he's got the WBA.
Realistic fights, realistic unification matches, or perhaps a Donaire versus Rodriguez fight on the PBC side of things, and an Inoue versus Maloney fight over there at Top Rank.
If Nonito wins his next fight and Emmanuel wins his next fight, I could see the PBC putting that together.
Over there at Top Rank, Bob Arum, he seems to have a soft spot for the Maloney brothers, so I'm sure he'll finagle a situation to where maybe he gets to fight Takuma Inoue, Naoya's younger brother, and exact revenge on him.
The landscape is changing in the men's bantamweight division with a few familiar faces in place.
118 is going to need unification matches. These champions, potential champions, cannot afford to stay away from each other. In order to continue to garner this division attention, they have to fight, they have to unify. And finally, in men's super middleweight and light heavyweight news, Team Bivol says Canelo talking about a rematch was always just a front for the fans.
Personally, I think that Team Bivol are now feeling the pinch, feeling bitter that they perhaps overplayed their hand in the rematch.
Negotiations for it. A representative for Dimitri Bivol always felt Canelo Alvarez was simply using his charges name for clout.
Imagine that.
The WBA light heavyweight titleist from Russia was expected to fight Alvarez in a rematch this fall, but the two sides were unable to come to an agreement on a deal. Bivol's chief handler, veteran manager Vadim Kornilov, denounced Alvarez last month for trying to offer his client the same terms as the first fight.
Now you have no fight.
And pursuing what Vadim Kornilov and Team Bivol imagined would have been better terms, now they have no terms and no fight, and no opponent in sight.
But you think that Canelo was using you for clout.
Even though Bivol was the victor, Bivol defeated Alvarez by unanimous decision last year at 175 pounds for Bivol's WBA title, and he did a great job. He beat Canelo comprehensively.
But that doesn't mean that he was in control of negotiations. That doesn't mean that he brought all the value to the rematch, all the value to the table.
The inconvenient truth that many of Canelo Alvarez's critics refuse to acknowledge is that Canelo was still the A-side in negotiations. It wasn't a transference of marquee value in the first fight.
It's really not how it works.
After Dimitri Bivol's team balked at his demands, Alvarez quickly turned his attention elsewhere. He briefly flirted with the idea of fighting cruiserweight titleist Badu Jack before agreeing to a multi-bout contract with the PBC. That union effectively signaled the end of Alvarez's relationship with Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing, which had promoted the majority of the Mexican superstars' fights for the past several years. Kornilov believes Alvarez was simply stringing them along, mentioning Bivol's name at every pass to curry favor with the public. As I have said before, Canelo talking about a Bivol rematch was always
just a front for the fans.
On Friday, Alvarez announced he would be taking on undisputed junior middleweight champion Jermell Charlo September 30th in Las Vegas. Alvarez had repeatedly expressed his desire to fight Bivol in a rematch. After the loss to Bivol, Hearn said he convinced Alvarez to forego an immediate rematch.
The thing is that Dimitri Bivol beat Canelo comprehensively. Was there really a need for a second fight? A need for a rematch?
I firmly believe that the Dimitri Bivol people overplayed their hand, not realizing that Canelo Alvarez wanting a second fight, wanting a rematch, that was optional. He's the fighter with the most options today. Thus, it doesn't behoove anyone to hardline him.
You make yourself too hard to deal with, and he's just going to move on.
Not dissimilar from what I've been telling you in reference to the Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz negotiations, that Andy Ruiz is overplaying his hand, that Deontay Wilder has leverage because he has options.
Even if their marquee value is in a similar place right now, that doesn't give Andy the upper hand. That doesn't mean they're on equal footing.
It's a lot more obvious when it comes to Canelo and Dimitri Bivol. Their marquee value is nowhere in the same place.
It's not.
And if you make yourself too hard to deal with, he's just gonna move on. You didn't like the terms offered to you, now you have no terms and no fight.
So was that really the right decision?
If Dimitri had some kind of an alternative to a Canelo Alvarez fight that was equal to or greater than in value, I could understand.
But he doesn't. He's in limbo right now.
All the momentum that he amassed last year decisioning Canelo Alvarez and his countryman Zurdo Ramirez has all but dissipated.
It's gone.
He hasn't fought yet this year. They're talking about putting him in there with the United Kingdom's own Dan Aziz. That's hardly a substitute for a Canelo Alvarez fight. So in pursuing better terms for a Canelo Alvarez rematch, they now have no terms and no fight.
And you're telling me that they didn't overplay their hand? Canelo Alvarez has several options. Jermell Charlo, Jermall if he ever returns, David Benavidez,
David Morrell, Errol Spence Jr. if he emerges victorious later on this month, and even if he doesn't, fighting Canelo and moving up. It's still an option, and that's what I was always getting at. Canelo's got so many options, so many guys that are willing to fight him, you don't want to hardline him.
Well, you have his attention.
Because he can swap you out for someone else, still make a boatload of cash, and you'll be left out in the cold.
Yeah.
You'll be frozen out. Now, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
You're fucked. I'm not at all broken up that the second fight didn't take place because I didn't see a need for the second fight, though. If we don't have it, that's why.
It's not my intention to chastise Dmitry Bivol or Vadim Kornilov for their decision-making so much as highlighting that it looks like they made the wrong decision.
Because look at where you are right now. What the hell are you gonna do?
Better hope that Callum Smith beats Artur Beterbiev later on this summer, takes those 3 belts from him and brings him back to Matchroom, then maybe you can fight him.
Level of uncertainty we see in Dmitry Bivol's career. Dmitry Bivol, who is currently going through a divorce.
What?
You heard that right.
This year is a far cry from the last one.
Playing hard to get, you're going to make yourself hard to want. You don't have all the leverage in the situation just because you won the first fight. You don't automatically become the face of boxing or the cash cow of boxing, the guy with all the leverage and all the power just because you won the first fight. As strange as that might seem to you guys, that's just not how this works.
It is a lot more nuanced than that.
But a rule of thumb that you might want to employ is who has more options? Because whoever has more options likely has more leverage in the situation.
Whosoever can afford to walk away from negotiations, walk away from the table and not miss a beat, that's likely the guy with the upper hand.
That's the inconvenient truth. The reality of things. The guy who can't, the guy with less options needs to be aware of that because you're going to negotiate your ass out of a fight. That's what you're going to do, and it won't be the first time.
Won't be the first time I've seen that happen, likely won't be the last.
It's hard for me to look at this any other way, that you didn't like the terms that you were offered, which were the same terms that you accepted in the first fight. The first time you didn't like those terms, now you have no terms.
And no fight.
Before you go telling me about how horrible those terms were the first time out, that was likely a career high purse for Dmitry Bivol. Likely a career high payday that he can't get now.
Can't get that same money with anybody else now.
So is it that the terms were horrible? Is it that it was unfair? Or is it that you overplayed your hand, not realizing you ain't got that many alternatives?
So you want to drive a hard bargain, you're going to drive yourself into a wall.
Grade school mentality that Dmitry Bivol would call all the shots in the rematch. That sentiment has aged like so many avocados on so many breakfast bars.
It's not how this works.